Disclaimer: no data subjects were harmed in the making of this podcast. Welcome to the Privacy Bar and Bants podcast. We make privacy awareness simple. Sit back, relax, and grab your darkest privacy myths and misconceptions. Your mind-boggling experience begins in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
These are
Oh,
our
you need to
lovely
drink water and
DPO
so
and
have
anyway,
Right,
so
because
who am I? I'm yet in the
Okay,
industry.
next. Next question. Next. Hello, listeners of the Privacy Bound Bands podcast. Welcome to another episode, and this episode is one that I am particularly excited for. On this episode, we have someone very special, but I will save introductions. For now, you just need to know her name is Leena, and Leena is someone that you definitely want to know. Leena, how's your week been? What have you been up to? What has been happening in the privacy world?
I've been okay. Because I work at the regulator for data protection and privacy in the country. So we've been working towards doing National Privacy Week. And so that's kind of what it's been like. It's been really hectic, trying to get all the letters out and the logistics and making sure we have like a perfect event so that it gets out there, it gets on the, we get the kind of media awareness we're looking for because we're still relatively new as well. So that's basically been it, to be honest. That's all I can think of right now. I won't lie. Like, other than the few personal things happening in my life, everything else is surrounded is based on Privacy Week. It's so intense. But yeah, that is life. We move.
Look, I think so. Privacy Week is one that I mean, we're a podcast as well. We're a privacy podcast, and I can tell you that it's one that has been taking up a lot of my brain space because I'm constantly like, okay, what do we have planned? Are we ready? Is the graphics done? Is this done? But yeah, we're looking forward to it. I'm also looking forward to it. I mean, it's nice that there is a regulator now that's dedicated to privacy now in Nigeria at least, and that that there's a consciousness about celebrating Privacy Week. I'm actually excited and looking forward to the kind of stuff that is going to come out of this. I'm sure that you've got your hands in it. It's going to be fantastic.
I pray so. I hope so. That is definitely the plan. And you're right. And the funny thing is that it's not just Nigeria. It's everywhere. It's global. It's a global thing.
But what do you think are some of the strong themes we can expect from this year's Privacy Week? Because I mean, especially for us, like taking the concept of Privacy Week, which is a global thing, and localizing it. What are some of like the themes that I mean, we can expect to see the regulator push strongly? On it
It's very simple. Privacy matters. It's just we're trying to simplify it because a lot of people still don't understand what it is. Nigeria is still relative. The whole concept of privacy and protection is still an emerging concept in the country, and so it's so difficult to get people to understand the importance of these things. They just see it as like, oh, government is just creating another agency, they're just wasting funds, etc. But it's like this thing, it's not just it's not just Nigeria. Everywhere in the world they're building upon supervisory authorities because we're seeing how we're transforming into a digital world, and we've already even transformed into a digital world, and it's only going to get worse, right? All right, so you need to have some form of regulation. You can't just allow all these big tech companies to just come in and do what they want, and so you have to start from somewhere, and I guess that's where we're starting from. And so that's what we're trying to push. The message this year is just privacy matters, the importance of it, raise awareness of it, raise awareness of who we are as an organization as well, and then just sort of move in from there.
I mean, this is perfect because today's episode is actually titled Your Data Matters. And it's like the play on matters as in MATTERZ and then MATTERS because it does matter and we're going to be discussing those matters. So I think let us start by actually getting to know a bit more of the fantastic voice we've been hearing, who's taking time out of a very busy schedule, as you all know, prepping for Privacy Week, to be here on the podcast. Leena, do you mind just telling us a little bit about who we're listening to?
Hi everyone. So my name is Leena Abba. I work at the Nigeria Data Protection Bureau. I have roughly 2.5 years of experience in data protection and privacy. I think I don't know whether I should say it, but like my story getting into data protection and privacy was basically an accident, but it turned out
Please
to
tell
work out
us.
very well for me.
Please tell us.
No,
I think
so
there are many of us, many people who stumbled into this, but please tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, okay. So I had I'm a lawyer, a trained lawyer. I was working first more in prosecution initially, and so I had moved to the National Information Technology Development Agency, that's NITDA. And so when I got to NITDA, initially in my head, I was
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, I'm a lawyer. I want to make sure that I stick towards still being a lawyer. I hope they push me into the legal department, blah blah blah. I was so worried that I would be pulled away from like law for some, which is very odd anyway. But I was so worried about being pulled away from being a lawyer and stuff. And I thought just they would just send me to some random department and I would end up just doing like random things. And so then they posted me to the e-government development and regulations department. And so I went quickly and was searching. I was like, oh, what is that? Am I still going to be doing like legal work, etc., etc.? I did see that they had regulations on compliance. So funny enough, the Nigeria Data Protection regulation desk was part of the EGDR, and the only certified data protection officer at the time at
Mm.
NITDA was under that department. So we had started working with him, and
Mm.
the director of that department is now the national commissioner of the bureau as well. And so
Commissioner.
yeah, so
Yeah.
when I got in, I didn't even really know. Like, of course, I knew what data protection and privacy was, but I didn't know that Nigeria was even doing work on it or that we had the regulation or anything. So,
Mm.
like, everything was so new to me and it was so fresh to me. And I found it so interesting. And I was like, wow, God, really do work in wondrous ways because I did not expect myself to be, and I don't even think I would, yeah, and I don't even think I would have been interested in being like, if not, I was thrown into it, and so we started. So basically, I was just shadowing the person in charge at the time, my supervisor at the time, and he was, he was a certified data protection officer, and he was the one doing he was working on the regulation. He was trying to get guidelines out, so I was basically just behind him, just running up and down. And so I picked up a lot on that.
Yeah.
I did a couple of examinations for data protection, PECB certified data protection officer, and then also ISO 27701, which is the privacy information management system as well.
Infosec. Yeah.
Yes, InfoSec. So just so that I can also, have more understanding of everything that we're doing. But interestingly, now what I do at the bureau is I'm more in charge of strategy, partnerships, and just, trying to bring in people that would work with collaborate with us because we're still relatively new and like I mentioned earlier, and just try and
Yeah.
see how they can help us get more awareness and so on. But yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this is very interesting. Because actually, I met Lena for the first time in her role as strategy partnerships. I was working for an NGO at the time, and Lena was the one who was in charge of the partnerships. So we were looking to partner with the bureau at the time. I mean, partnerships is such a big part of what you guys are doing at the moment, especially in light of Privacy Week.
Mhm.
So I'm guessing there's a lot of pressure going on. But what kind of, should I say, what kind of partnerships are you looking forward to the most? I mean, going into 2023.
Mm. Okay, so just before I get into that, so when I met Yetunde, I was so not surprised, but I was really impressed by like how eloquent and how well spoken you are. We were even talking about you at the office after, and we are like, oh, like I like how she presented herself, and you went, yeah, we were so happy with that and everything, and I was telling them at the office, I was like, yeah, I like how well spoken she was and everything. But I know after that, I had just, work just went crazy after that, and so I wasn't very good at communicating and dealing with the issues. But so please forgive me for that. But I mean, initially, my first impression was like, yes, this is someone I want to work with definitely. And here we are. So that was just, sorry, just a little side note.
Here we are. I mean,
Yeah.
here we are
But yeah,
actually, because look at this. Yeah, this is
that's
something
the
that has come out of totally different context, and here we are. But thank you so much for the compliments.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you so much. It's nice to know that I was being spoken about in the bureau. Yes, thank you so
But yeah, you're welcome. But
much.
so like what you were talking, we were talking about the partnerships with the bureau. So just to, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but the
Yes.
bureau is basically mandated to basically push for the implementation of the Nigeria Data Protection Regulation, push for the creation of a Nigeria Data
Yeah.
Protection law in the country, so that we don't just have a subsidiary legislation, but we
Mm.
also have a law. And so, and also we're just, general
Yeah.
awareness and pushing data protection and privacy practices within the public sector as well as the private sector and so on, and regulating all of that. And so that is what the Nigeria Data Protection Bureau is, and that is what we're doing. And we were created out of NITDA. So in terms of partnerships, I think we have a couple. I don't know, I don't think I'm allowed to speak on them yet, but we have a couple partnerships on the way, where we're going to help build capacity building for the public sector first, and the private sector. The public sector, because they
Mm.
are some of the major data controllers in the country at the moment, and they do
In
not comply
Nigeria,
as much.
absolutely.
Yeah, in Nigeria, exactly, and they do not comply in a way that they need to. And so there's just a need, and it's simply because they don't know. Because a lot of the time when we visit data some major data controllers government offices, and we tell them, oh, part of our awareness is to make sure that you do this, and you have a data protection officer, you train your data protection officer, etc., etc., etc. They're all like very
Mm.
interested, and they're like, yes, we usually have very good feedback from the heads of agencies, of course. And so it's just for them to implement that. And it's very difficult to change things, but then I think over time we'd be able to do that. So yeah, so a lot of the partnerships are towards trying to build capacity of members of both sectors, and then also try to generally raise more awareness, and reach the grassroots at some point as well.
Hmm. I mean, so this is I'm very excited about this because and this is very on theme for the podcast. But before we even go into the thing, we want to hear Lena give us some. We want to hear some more information from Lena. So basically, one of on this segment of the podcast, which we've called the Spotlight segment, we would like to invite Lena to spotlight an organization that's doing some privacy awareness work, or that maybe has done some work to enlighten the users, or just basically some good privacy awareness work. So Lena, do you mind sharing maybe one or two, or just letting us into? Yeah.
Um, yeah. Okay. So first of all, of course, I'll just talk a little bit about. I've already talked a little bit about the Nigeria Data Protection Bureau. We're still new. We're a government agency. We're trying to push for General Privacy Week awareness. Privacy awareness. See how Privacy Week just comes to my head.
Get
I
it?
mean privacy.
Yeah.
We're trying to push for just privacy, data protection and privacy awarenesses, and try to get people to implement that into their organizations, and then also try to regulate the big techs that are already operating within our country. And try and see how to manage those sort of relationships. I know, if anyone is interested, they can always take a look at us on we're on all the social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook, etc. NDPB Nigeria. So NDPB Nigeria on all these social media platforms. Another organization I would love to talk about is which is funny enough something I came across them recently while organizing Privacy Week. They're called Cyber Safe Foundation. I think they're
Ah,
called
yes, 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 yes.
yeah, I think they're called CyberSafe HQ on Instagram, and I was so impressed. And I saw that the person, not that I'm biased, but the fact that it was a woman that was the CEO, I was like, yes, yes. I think it's such an interesting
Yes,
space.
women in
Yeah,
cybersecurity.
yeah, exactly. And it's just a side note to that as well. Anytime I'm attending any event or like work event, I always look around the room and I see like very few women. There are always more men there. So whenever I see that like the woman
Mm-hmm.
is the one even in charge, I'm like, yes, girl power.
Yes,
Um,
absolutely. Yep.
yeah, but so yeah, the CEO is called Confidence Stavely. I'm not sure how to if I'm pronouncing
Yeah.
that correctly. Yeah. So she's
Yeah, I
also
think it's Stavely,
mhm,
maybe.
Stavely, so she's going to even be one of the panelists for our one of our events that's going to be on the 30th of January. And so she's going to be a panelist there. We had to get her on when we found out, when we saw everything that she was doing, and we're like, yep, this is definitely someone we want to be working with. So yeah, so she's
Yeah.
there. She runs an NGO on just trying to raise awareness on privacy and protection. She has what I like about them is they simplify everything, and so sometimes you just see like basic things like set up your two-factor authentication everywhere. And then in some other videos, they
Yeah.
make all these little short clips of like, or should I call? I think I'll say skits of just like,
Yeah, like the
better do
TikToks
this.
basically.
Yes, exactly. TikToks of just them, some people at their office just like simplifying data protection and privacy. And I think that's very interesting. I think they've come a long way, and I really like their Instagram page as well, as a side note. But yeah.
CyberSafe Foundation is definitely doing amazing work. Yeah. Do you know they also have like the Cyber Girls is basically another thing they do where they basically try to empower more girls to, which is
I
quite in
saw
line with
that.
what we're discussing, empower more
Yeah.
girls to have skills. Yes, so they basically give you cybersecurity training for free,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like a 9 months long
Yeah,
intensive course, and
of
you
course.
end
Yeah.
up with like being able to like you can choose your path. It's just amazing work that she's doing, amazing work that
Yeah.
she's doing. Yeah. Okay, thank you so much for spotlighting, Lena. I
You're
think
welcome.
that we would then like to ask you to give us one privacy myth that you think, going to Privacy Awareness Week, if there's something we should all be focusing on kicking out of, existence, it
Mm-hmm.
should be this one
Mm-hmm.
thing. Um,
Mm-hmm.
what is
Let's
that one
see.
thing for you?
I think one thing that people usually think is that, for example, when you use your browser, and you go into incognito mode or like private mode, you just assume that that means that you're actually, people don't have access to your information anymore. And I think that is very, very dangerous.
Hmm.
And in fact, to me, like going on incognito mode, it's just to a certain extent. So it only stops your data to a certain extent, but still things like your browsing history and like downloaded cookies and so on are still being kept on your device, and are still being can still be seen by
Hmm.
the browser, and also by
Third
your
parties.
yes, third
Yeah.
parties, and also by the service providers as well. So I think it's important that people know that just because you're on incognito mode or in private mode doesn't really mean that your data cannot be accessed at all. It doesn't, it's still there. In fact, I mean, the internet is just, and that's one of the dangers of the internet, is that once you decide to partake or be a part of being on the internet, you're there for, it's whatever is on the internet can stay on the internet for years to come. And I think that's one of the more dangerous things that come out of, digital, this new digital sphere that we're getting into. So yeah, I think that would be
Yeah.
my own myth that people need to be aware.
So that this is literally the thing the internet never forgets. So actually, because I think this might be a good point for us to sort of go into. So we have this new segment where we're starting on the podcast where we're giving people free gifts, and basically in this segment we're recommending a privacy tool. On this particular episode, our recommended privacy tool is um Backlight. So private Backlight is a privacy inspection tool that allows you to scan any website to find out what specific tracking technologies are being used on that site. This means that you can know who's getting your data every single time you visit a website. Um, it tells you if there are any advertisement trackers, or you trying to gather cookies to serve you more targeted advertisements. If there are any cookies that will evade your browser cookie blocker, those cookie blockers that we think, oh, that's perfect. There's some cookies that can evade those blockers. Also, if there are any key login trackers, a key login tracker is basically a tracker that captures any text that you type into a page before you submit an online form. So sometimes when you're entering in your passwords, there are any of those kind of trackers that basically log whatever keys you're typing on the keyboard. It'll tell you that. Also, basically, it helps you to minimize your digital footprint by literally forewarning you, so you know what exactly you're getting onto when you're signing onto it or accessing a website. Or yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so I actually recommend, to our listeners, please, some for some of your favorite websites, put it on Backlight, see what tracking technologies are being used on those websites, and please share your results across the social media platforms. Feel free to tag us in whatever you share, but we'll definitely put a link to Backlight in our description for the podcast so you can go have a look and try it out for yourself. It's like a fun little activity. I actually tried it with a website called Jumia. Jumia is basically an e-commerce platform in Nigeria. And to be honest, I wasn't surprised. But then I think I wasn't surprised because I'm a privacy person. So I expect I expect I expect these things to happen. So I know what I'm expecting to see. There were no surprises. No surprise. Okay, to our main conversation for today, which I think Lena we're very excited about, especially in light of Privacy Week. So basically, on this particular episode, we want to discuss, like I said, your data matters and data matters, basically. And I feel like this is our opportunity to really demystify understanding of data, what it means, what can be done with it, and how to take personal security measures. I feel like a lot of times when people talk about protecting your data and stuff, it's usually spoken about at a cybersecurity level. So like companies basically make sure that you can't be hacked, put your defenses in place. But what personal security measures or what personal data protection measures can individuals take to ensure that they can protect themselves? So if we're in this world where we feel like our data is spinning out of control, like everybody's doing everything, this and that is happening, what can we do to basically protect ourselves, so we don't feel lost? And I think, Lena, let's start from maybe the part where we demystify data. So Lena, can you help our listeners understand what is personal data? What is it? Why are we sensitive about it? What is important about it? Just demystify it
Mm-hmm.
as best as you can.
Well, personal data just means any sort of information that is identifiable to a certain person. So if it has any form of identification, it simply just means if you see for example, an email address, right? And within that email address, it says, okay, maybe Leena Abba at. So that's referring to a very specific thing. It's referring to a specific person, and that just makes it personal data because one person can be identified by that email address, right? Or name,
Hmm.
or bank information, or your BVN, or your which is a bank
Hmm.
verification number, yeah, or your national
Numbers.
identification
Hmm.
number. So these are all examples of personal data. Okay, maybe I'll ask this later on. I just wanted to know what your opinion would be on bank information and whether you think that would be considered personal data or sensitive personal data. But I don't know if we should talk about this later.
I mean, let's get into it. Let's get into it. So, whether I think bank information is sensitive personal data. So, with personal data, everything is to a degree. Even something as simple as salary information. I think they call it. There's something called, I think, is it K anonymity. So that's the
Mm,
degree
mm,
from
mm.
from the degree to which the data is not identifiable,
It's
and that's
viable.
basically the idea. So exactly. So if you say X earns 50 million pounds, and X works at the bureau, for example,
Mm-hmm,
you can identify X. Although many
mm-hmm,
people work at the bureau and many people could earn 50 million pounds, but when you have those two pieces of information together, there can be many people who earn 50 million pounds at the bureau.
mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm.
everything, whether the money that is going in and out of your account, your spending trends, everything is literally at this point that we are in this digital age with AI and all sorts of data processing information and data analysis systems and all sorts. Almost everything is personally identifiable data. Everything, I think, for me just depends on context. I think you have to take the information. So is it banking information, like someone's spending patterns? I mean, I think a lot of people don't even understand that, when you go to stores and they tell you to sign up for the app to shop
Mm,
online, or they give you a membership card, they're not doing that because, you know, they just want to give you free money. No. The idea is they want
mhm,
to see what people like buying. Maybe sometimes it's not necessarily directed to doing something to you, but they're using that information to improve their services, to make sure that they can give you more things that you like, or more things that people buy, or make sure that they have enough quantity. So if they know 100 million toilet rolls are being bought every month, they will make sure they have 100 million and some, right? So every single thing is almost personal. So when you say banking information, so something like your card information, is it personally identifiable information? Yeah, because
Mhm.
in most contexts where you would have someone's bank information, it would be something that, like, if you have someone's card, if you have a photo of someone's card, many bank cards have your name at the bottom of it.
Yeah.
If you have just their long number, that long number, in the right context, who has it? Is it somebody in the public, or is it somebody at the bank? Because at the bank, the long number, if you type in the long number into their systems, I'm sure you can actually find out whose account that long number belongs to. So everything, depending on context, I think it is personally identifiable data. But tell us, Lena, what do you feel about that? Are you on the side of, if financial information or banking information is personally identifiable data or not?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I definitely think it's personal identifiable data. Personally, I think it should be considered as so I noticed that a couple of resources don't regard financial information as sensitive personal data, and a
I
couple,
think that's the conversation that
yeah,
that we
yeah,
did
and then
have.
a couple others do, yeah, and a couple others do recognize it as sensitive personal data. For me personally, I think that if someone has access to your statement of accounts alone, that is all. Financial information is so key, because everything because everything, if you think about it, everything you do basically reflects on your statements of accounts, for example, right?
Especially in a
So
cashless economy, as what we're trying to do
ex-
globally. Yeah.
exactly, and I mean, Nigeria too is trying to push to have that cashless economy as well. So you can find out where a person works. If you have access to that, just having access to their BVN, you could find out where the person works. You can find out where the person lives. You can find out who the person is spending money on. You can find out, it's like, it's really, really serious. So for me personally, I just think it would be considered sensitive personal data. But that was just something that I've been thinking about for a while now, and I was wondering why it was considered just personal data, not sensitive. But yeah.
So, just to, let me, for the listeners who maybe are unfamiliar with the concept of sensitive personal data as distinguished from regular personal data, sensitive
Mm.
personal data is basically data that has been designated for some special protection, because of the potential impacts that processing it could have. So you cannot process it. You cannot just use those kind of data anyhow. For example, and you can't use it anyhow. If you're using, you have to make sure that you're being extremely careful to make sure it's properly secured. Like, it requires another level. So yes, personal data should be protected, but sensitive personal data, because of the potential impact that could result from disclosure of such information, or any wrongful processing of such information, you would need to sort of make sure that extra care has been taken when it's being processed. Now, I think with financial information as well, Lena, this so the I think the reason why the argument even exists, whether it should or shouldn't be, is that I mean, people think, what's harmful, what's the problem with somebody knowing how much you earn, or what's the problem with someone knowing you took a loan out? But I think that if you think about it, when you transfer that out of, so for example, one of the things that are considered sensitive personal data is something like your health data, right, Lena? Any other examples that you
Mm-hmm.
can think of offhand?
Mm-hmm.
Your
Political
ethnicity.
opinions, your religious beliefs,
Exactly,
your
exactly,
political opinions as well. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. So
Genetic
your
data.
gender, your sexuality, your exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So those things are considered sensitive, because anybody that has access to that kind of information could potentially, in one way or the other, use it to sort of pull some strings with you, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think
Mm-hmm.
even when you think financial data as well, so someone someone has taken a loan out, that maybe they've defaulted on paying back the loan.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much that could be done, and it could be
With
potentially
that
damaging
information.
to people's, exactly, to people's characters, and it could be damaging in so many ways. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it's one
Yeah.
of those ones where the argument will persist, but
Yeah.
I think we in terms of actual. So I think what the sort of midpoint has been, there's this position where, like, people say it's not sensitive or special category data, but it is data that is so sensitive that when you're considering the impact of it, you need to consider it as one that is highly impactful. So when you're doing an assessment of it, your mitigation for the risks that could result
Mm.
is one that has to be. So that's, I think, the balance that we're sort of taking, because well, you
Mhm.
can say it's not as definitely not as sensitive as have somebody having a BVN number.
Mm.
That's pretty sensitive. Yeah, so it's just like
Yeah.
finding there's a I
The
don't know,
balance.
there's a point, but I think the world is constantly evolving, so we'll see where we go in the next few years,
Where we go,
because
exactly. And another thing is, when you were talking about salaries, I was just thinking about how weird Nigerians usually are about their salaries and like their financial information. And I think maybe that's why I think that this is considered sensitive personal data, because in Nigeria it's you can't even when you're trying to get a job, and you ask them for your, like, how much you're going to be paid, that could be an issue on its own. Like, it's not, we don't have that sort of
yeah,
transparency when it comes to financial information. So I guess again that's why I thought it would be sensitive. But yeah.
yeah, sensitive. I mean, to be honest, I think this is very interesting also because when you then start thinking about financial information in that context, you like you sort of see it's like societal as well. What is considered sensitive, and I think this is
Mhm.
the approach the data protection laws are taking globally, in the sense that we need to start considering local contexts to these issues.
Yeah,
What is
exactly.
categorized? Yeah, yeah. I think
Exactly.
we were doing a
100%.
recording recently with someone, and they mentioned that there's a country that actually says your is it your lineage data, or your surname, or your family's what do you call it, your basically your family's data is about your surname and your family affiliation, that's sensitive personal data. But I guess that's a
Mhm.
context, that a local context that should be appreciated. So I think
Mhm.
these things are very contextually locally. But then, something
Yeah.
that also trips me about financial information is, if we say it's sensitive data, I think it would then be difficult to police, especially for us as women, police paid biases. Do you not
Mhm.
think that might become a thing, where it'll be difficult to sort of police inequality in payments, because
Ah, oh, okay, I get
yes,
what you're saying. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it's a
But do
little
we have
tricky.
inequality? But do we have inequality in payments in Nigeria? I don't think.
I think so.
Do
Like,
we?
do you mean
Okay.
as a thing that's
I think
existing
that's more of like a
socially, or as a
Western.
thing that
No, I know. No, no. Of course, I know we
inequality?
have inequality biases in the country. Obviously, no, no. I mean,
Yeah.
what I mean is just that in terms of in terms of pay, like I don't think we have that. Funny enough, I genuinely think that it's more of a Western bias where women are paid less than men. Over here, I think, for example, if you're working in the government, you're all going to be paid the same salary, no matter what you're doing. If it's the same job, you're being. Do you understand? And I don't know about the
No, I
private
think that
sector, but
inequality, yeah, I get it. I think it's a
Mhm.
private sector concept, even in the West, because if you think about it,
Mm,
even in when you think about, the I think Nigeria is such a. I would find it difficult to believe that it didn't exist, because Nigeria is such a patriarchal society, and so I think that there might be that. I don't know. I mean, I don't have the stats, so I can't really speak on it. But it's one that I would be impressed for it not to exist, because, and I don't think that Westerners, by any chance, I don't think that it's because they're
mm,
better or whatnot. But I just think that because we're
mm,
such uh, um we're patriarchal society to a very good degree, especially when it comes to career and profession. That I don't know
mm.
that I don't I don't know. To be honest, I wonder if that's a thing. But I mean, that's another context to
We
sort of put
yeah.
into this, because if
Mhm,
we don't have that, then
mm,
there should be no challenge to sort of having financial data, sensitive personal information. There's no
mhm,
obstacle, you know.
mhm,
Yeah.
mhm,
I mean, this
mhm.
this has been a very interesting conversation so far. Lena, thank you for that question. I think you really gave us something to sort of kick up the to boil the
Tempo.
blood,
Mhm.
to kick up the tempo as we start this episode. I think so. I mean, it seems like today everyone wants your name, your email address, everybody just wants something from you. You cannot do anything on the internet without somebody collecting some form of data about you. I think that is something that we should actually even talk about. It's almost
Mhm,
impossible right now to use the internet without data being collected. I don't think it's possible.
mhm.
Maybe if you use some special type of browsers, I don't think it's actually possible for you
It's
to
I don't
record,
it's not
for you
I
to
don't think
yeah.
it's possible. That's why no,
Because
definitely
between
I
the
don't think
tracking
it's possible.
technologies, yeah, between the tracking technologies and the things that actually just ask you to provide your name and your information, th-
Mhm.
there's no space. Yeah, yeah, because you're always being tracked. Because I mean, for
And
security purposes as well, websites are tracking. Yeah,
exactly, and that's other than the security purposes, that's why a lot of businesses are even thriving. It's because they're collecting our information. It's as simple as that. It makes our life easier. It makes their life easier. You know, we just all kind of just accept it because we're like, well, you know, I can go on Instagram and buy whatever I need to buy without actually having to leave my house, or I can go on Jumia and just buy
yeah.
whatever. So you know, so it's a
And I'm
tricky one, but
enjoying the Netflix's suggested suggestions for me. It's literally just what I want to watch. You
exactly.
know,
And
I
YouTube
like
as well.
when and YouTube exactly when they're giving me the those things. So like there are I guess you could say, and you've identified, like we mentioned, necessities, yes, security, but there are also socially advantageous reasons why we want data to be processed and collected. One of them being, as we said, we like services tailored to us as human beings. We want to have personalized services. You want to log into your bank and see, hi Yetunde, or hi Lena. You want that personalization. You want Netflix to know that you paused your movie at 20 minutes 30 seconds and to bring you back right there when you're coming back into the app. We like those things. So definitely there's going to be data collection going on, right? But
Hmm.
I think what we want to ask is, are they the good guys? The people collecting all these data, people that are constantly seeking to, collect our data, know our information, are they the good guys?
Hmm.
Are they the good guys?
So
Are they bad guys? I think, or is it the middle?
I think I don't think that they're the good guys because I don't think they're collecting our data to make things like they're not necessarily doing it because they care about how we are faring as consumers, or they're doing these things because if they make life easier for us, we will keep going back to them. So it's as simple as that. So I wouldn't say that the people collecting data, I think the only way I would find collection of data where I would see people collecting data as the good guys is if they're trying to do it for like a public for for a reason that it's going to benefit everyone. And so, for example, I was reading a report, a World Bank report, and they said that the use of data, the use of and collection of data has helped simplify a lot of processes for them to be able to, give out aid to certain areas, right? So they were able to identify, for example, that like, oh, these people are living in these people are suffering from droughts that has taken over the whole their society in general. And so they what they do is they target those set of people and say, okay, this is what they're going through, this is what the kind of aid they need, this is the kind of development that they need, and then they provide that for them. And even then it could still be questioned and say, okay, but then what do you do after you provide that aid? What do you still do with the data? How are you storing the data? How is it being um deleted, erased, etc.? Those questions could still come up. But I think that would be the only point where I would think that, oh, okay, data can actually be used for good, and it is being used for good. A lot of NGOs, a lot of UNHCR, the United Nations, just in general, they provide a lot of support to people using this sort of using data. Basically, it's as simple as that. So yeah, so I think that's what I would say. I don't, but I think in terms of like consumerism and the whole world of like marketing and advertising and the big techs as well, I do not think that they're collecting our data for our own good. I don't think they're the good guys. I think they're trying to grow, and I think we are just helping them grow because they're making our lives easier as well. So unless we decide to stop using these services, I don't see how we're going to, really control the use of data and so on.
So because what I hear you say is, they're not exactly. We can't say good guys, but we can't say bad guys either, because there's just that little bit in the middle where, yes, they're collecting the data and it's making them a lot of money, but they're doing things and giving us services that sort of, also excite us, and things that we're thrilled about. And I think that that's what you're like basically aiming at. They're not
Mm,
good,
mm,
but they're not bad.
mm-hmm. I guess so. They're in between. But someone in my office always says that for him, he doesn't use social media. He doesn't use social media whenever he goes on sites where they ask him to click on cookies. He doesn't do that. He doesn't use bank transfer, the whole app. He doesn't transfer his money through. He goes to the bank and everything. And I was saying to myself, I was thinking to myself, and I've even met someone that doesn't use WhatsApp. He only uses Telegram, and he's not on any. He has no social media presence at all. And so I guess there is a way, if you do not want to be part of the world, you can just sort of just live in your own bubble and just and just kind
But
of,
even living in your
limit.
own bubble, how far is that bubble gonna take you? It doesn't. So this is the thing. I think so. I think that's one of the things that I'm hoping we get to on the podcast today. Even when you take out all the stuff, you haven't stopped the processing of your data.
Mhm.
It's actually
Mhm.
almost impossible. And there's so many things you deny yourself. So, for example, if you go on a website, I think something that people don't understand as well about cookies is they're actually different types. So there's some cookies that are actually functional cookies. So the
Functional,
website
yeah.
functionality, all the things that like are moving, the things that are flying, all the exciting buttons, things that are spinning up and down. Those things are powered by those cookies. The thing that enables those things to work properly is the cookies, the
Mhm.
functionality cookies. So there's some websites that if you even reject, or if you press the reject all cookies button, you can't access the website. So like
Mhm. Right.
you would constantly be faced with this challenge of, even when you need essential things, where you're battling against the necessity of you doing things, and the fact that cookies are gonna cookie themselves, and they're gonna collect things about you. So I think one of the things that we're gonna get onto on podcast later on, just slightly later on, are just tips about how to sort of take those personal security or privacy, like kind of give a very good level of enlightenment as to, okay, what exactly are the practical steps that you want to be engaged in the digital economy, the global digital village, in digitalization, but you also want to reduce your sort of digital footprint. So what do we do, and what kind of things can you implement?
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay, I think one thing I also want to talk about as well is just the line of awareness. I feel like we need this episode is an awareness episode, so we just need to talk a little bit about it. So someone recently asked me about why there's such a huge fuss about data protection in recent times. In his words, I just don't get it. Isn't it just data? Shouldn't it be used? Have you ever gotten any of these kind of questions, and how would you typically answer it?
Hmm. I mean, yes, it should be used. I think the use of data has provided a lot of good to the world as well. We've talked about that just before this. But then why is it such a big fuss? Is because the more we transform into a digital world, the more we have hackers, the more we have we're also turning it can everything in this world can be used for good or for bad, right? And so there is always an advantage and a disadvantage. And so the more we grow, the more we're putting out a lot of information about ourselves just to general members of the public. So you have all these things about yourself. People can use information that you put online for against you. They can use these things against you. It can put you into harm's way, it can put you in danger and everything. And so it's very important. It can put a whole country in danger as well if people have access to data that they're not supposed to. But it's not in a way that we're trying to hinder development. It's not like that. It's just more of you're trying to protect the safety of citizens, of Nigerian citizens themselves as well. So that's why I think the world, and not just Nigerian citizens, I mean all over the world, protection of data protection is a big thing, especially in the EU, especially with the GDPR. And so I think it's there. It's coming up for a reason. All these things are coming up for a reason, and I think the more the world transforms, the more we need to continue to find ways to protect ourselves as well online.
Yeah. I mean, this is perfect. We actually are gonna run through a couple of scenarios, Lena, and I think that the
Hmm.
idea is that we want to sort of go what's going on behind the scenes when these things happen. So we're gonna go through some things that people consider personal experiences that we really hope some of our listeners can relate to, Then we're going to go
Mm-hmm.
behind the scenes to say, okay, so what happened? How did this become the result that the user or the person has experienced, and what can they do to protect themselves from these kind of situations in future?
Mm-hmm.
So first scenario that we're going to look at, so I'm reading the scenario now. So I received a phone call from someone claiming to be from my bank. They provided me with a lot of information that only my bank will know, and they're asking me to provide a code that has just been sent to my phone from the that's just been sent to my phone from the bank. I provided the code and realized that all the money in my account has been stolen.
Gang gang.
So I actually know someone who this scenario happened to.
Me
And
too.
I think that uh, this is literally one of the worst things that could happen.
I swear.
Selena,
So,
what's going on behind the scenes here?
hmm. So I know more than one person that this thing has happened to, and I'm always thinking to myself, why did you like? But then the thing is, people just don't know, I guess. But I think because maybe not even because I'm in the privacy space. Even before then, I'm just a little bit paranoid about things like this. So I don't really. I'm never eager to share information. The bank people can, even if it's actually from the bank, they can get angry if they want to get angry. That's their business. But like, I'm never like in a rush to just give you my personal financial information, especially. um but the issue is, people need to understand that banks, especially, they're very careful with the kind of things that they collect, the kind of data that they collect. And they're, because they're one of the most regulated sectors, they're very careful with so they have all these data, they use all these sort of data protection tools, because they need to be very careful because of the kind of information they're collecting, right? So even now, like when I updated my app, my bank app, I noticed that they had changed the way the numbers are set for you to type in your code, for you to even get into your app. It has been, changed around a little bit, so that if someone is looking behind, they won't really know. If they're just trying to memorize based on how it's one,
Hmm.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so they scatter that around, and it's now like 1, 5. So even for me, like, it takes me a long time for me to be able to, pick
To
out the
figure out how to put
numbers.
in your numbers.
Yeah, exactly. And so banks are putting a lot of data protection tools and privacy tools in place, and I think people need to acknowledge the efforts that they're making as well. So you need to understand, and they always send messages like, "Do not ever. We will never ask you for your code. We will never ask you for." So it's very important for people to just understand things like this and just know that never give out information that, unless you're 100% sure of who's requesting the information. And even then, you should always take the extra step, and if you receive that sort of message, you can just stop by your bank, and just show them the message, and show them that, oh, this is what I received. Should I go ahead with this request or not? It's very important that you take that extra step, because nobody, this is one of the worst things that could happen to you, your accounts being emptied. And so yeah, so I definitely think that it's just, we need to learn to also take the extra step. I think citizens need to now also take that responsibility upon themselves, because this is for you. It's not just the bank's
Yeah.
responsibility. You need to also learn how to protect yourself. And and the ways you can do that is just by simply not giving out information that is not requested. A lot of the time you receive messages from banks saying, do not, you, for example, you say this, they'll be like, this bank will never ask you for your PIN, never give this bank, or never share your OTP with anyone else, never. So you receive these messages. So just because someone calls you saying that, oh, I'm from this bank, I want, and it has happened. I've witnessed this sort of thing several times. There's a time that a bank just called, a supposed bank. I'm doing air quotations for the listeners, but like, a supposed
Quotations.
bank just, yeah, but a bank just called. I remember one of my cousins, we were sitting down, and she just put it on speaker, and he was like, oh, we're about to close your account. If you don't send this number, we have to fix. And this is how they get people, because it's like, you get so worried. Oh, why, anything about banks, people just generally are just so like, very anxious about it. There's a lot of anxiety around your
Yeah,
financials
because their
in
money is
general.
involved. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's how they trick you. They come on and they tell you all these things like, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to close your account if you don't. And she just hung up, and the guy kept calling and he kept calling, and she was like, look, please, I know you're not this bank. I know you're just trying to do this. And then the person just hung up the phone, and I was like, you see, it's so simple sometimes. Just ignore them, to be
Exactly.
honest. Just don't engage them. And
Yeah.
if you really want to be sure, or you're afraid of something, just quickly stop by a bank, you know. I was going to say send an email, but some banks are not always very good with responding to emails. So just like quickly, yeah, yeah, I know. So I mean, quickly just go stop by a bank and just go stop at their customer care and say, this is what I've received, and should I? But don't, please, 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 do not share. Nobody is going to be asking you for that kind of. No reasonable bank is going to be asking you for this kind of information, like your OTP, or and your
Mm.
passcode, or your PIN, or how much money you have in your account. No, it's not something that's common. So yeah.
I think something that also goes on behind the scenes as well is the fact that so sometimes banks actually, so the reason why hackers or scammers can access that your information in the first place is because sometimes banks themselves have maybe had breaches, security breaches. And I think that sometimes in these types of situation, as a data subject or as a person who has given your information to the bank, these are the social scenarios where you can also actually report to the bureau, right, Lena?
Yeah, yeah. That's an interesting angle as well that I forgot to mention as a regulator. I don't know how, but yeah. So it is, it is in a lot of instances we've had so many complaints of people saying, oh, this bank just created an account without my permission, or sometimes you see that there's been some form of data breach, and the data breach wasn't reported to us as a regulator within, you're supposed to report a data breach within 72 hours, and that's the data controllers sometimes just skip that process
Yeah,
until it gets so bad and it's on the news and everyone is talking
exactly.
about it. And that's when we're like, okay, let's go and start investigating into that and see what happened there, and the amount of data that was lost, and so on. And so I think banks do have their lapses. They do, in some situations, also allow for data breaches to happen. And when that happens, and that sort of information is already out in the public, that already puts a lot of people in danger. So yes, definitely, banks should not banks, sorry, data subjects are definitely supposed to file in send in a complaint to info@ndpb.ng, and you provide all sorts of, you put in all the details and just file in a complaint, and then we have an investigation team, and we also have a police enforcement team as well, and so that they will carry on the investigation and call in the bank, and so on. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is important. This is very important information. You can actually report. I think another angle to this particular scenario I also want to look at is also the angle of so you shouldn't provide any information over the phone, right? But sometimes these things are like, oh, you get an email that looks exactly like your bank statement. And then they tell you to click a link, and then they tell you to put in like
Details.
they tell you to go and put in your details. And this is the thing, I think sometimes we could also take this from the angle of putting in your link, but you've already mentioned don't provide your information when you don't trust the website, when you don't trust the information, when you're not convinced. But I think there's also an element of when you're using a particular email for banking information, for all sorts of things, all sorts of websites, you're putting it everywhere. They say free, come and get a free promo. When you come and get a free this, you're putting in your information. You have to be cautious about the kind of quality of information that comes into that email. I think that's another personal tip you can also
mm,
take, in the sense that
mm,
you
mm,
be careful. Some people actually choose to use a different phone number, a different email for their banking or for anything important, and then they use a different one for this website tells you to sign up for the
mm,
newsletter so you can get 20% off. You just put that other
mm,
email in. So I think that's
mm,
another tip that I personally think that you can take as a data subject as well, sort of encourage, or sorry, to sort of make sure that at least you put a sort of a gap. Even in terms of
mm,
financial information, I have people who actually have different cards for buying things online, separate from a card that they use to sort of that they put the bulk of their money on,
Yep.
or even shopping at
Mhm.
POS
Mhm.
machines, all sorts things like that. So those are like, you want to sometimes it's not just about like, you also want to try and put in stop gaps as well, I guess, between, you know, what things are the sort of data that you use, or things like email, phone numbers that you use for important stuff, and the stuff that you just give out to anybody. um um you know, so you don't get overwhelmed by all sorts of
100%.
information that,
100%.
yeah, yeah.
I was just going to say, based on what you've just said, so these are ways that you can still stay a part of the digital world without actually having to not be put yourself on the internet. So just the card example that you gave, for example, if you have a specific card where you're just putting like very little, maybe let's say you put 10,000 and you use that card to just
Yeah.
whenever you want to buy something, you sort of use that card, or you save that card on AliExpress or Jumia or whatever. I mean, I would always advise not to save your card on any website, but then just in case you do, even if someone hacks your account and has access to that particular card, it wouldn't really do much to you, because you already, you've already put in certain, like you call them, stop gaps before you've made any process. So yeah, definitely agree with that.
Yeah, the financial information stuff, I think, is one that's very prominent for us in Nigeria, where your banking details and just being extremely cautious really is very important, as you said. Okay, so next
100%.
scenario. I keep receiving broadcast messages from an Instagram vendor whom I purchased an item from once. Many times the messages have nothing to do with their products. I keep receiving messages advertising some of their church events, some messages that are prompting me to reshare if I want to be blessed. So I think this one is one that I've personally had experience with, where like someone sending you messages, if you love, if you love this, reshare this 100 times. If you want to be blessed, reshare this 1 million times.
I hate
And
those kind of
I think
messages. It's so annoying.
because it's well, to be fair, I mean, we're living in a society or in a world where people are of different backgrounds and faiths and beliefs, and so when you put stuff like that out, it can be very tricky sometimes. But I think that that's also the power of
Mhm.
personal data, right, Lena? Because we're trying to look at what's going on behind the scenes here. Should the vendor be doing this? What's going on behind the scenes?
Yeah. So definitely no. The vendor is not supposed to do. So the purpose, that, okay. So this is first of all against the purpose limitation, right? So the vendor collected
Yeah.
your data for a very particular purpose. One of the principles of both GDPR and the NDPR. And so the vendor collected your details for a for a specific purpose. You came in, you wanted to, purchase a particular thing, and then they ended up using that same data against you without your consent, and they started to share other things. Sometimes you get you usually have like a tick box when you buy something online, and they say, do you want to subscribe to
Mm,
our newsletter so that you continue to get
yeah.
promos and whatever. But then in this case, in this scenario that you gave, there was nothing like that. No permissions were given to continue to share, and then the person has even switched, the Instagram vendor has switched from selling bags and shoes to preaching to you about God. So like, it's like two completely different things, and it's not something you gave permission to do. So I think automatically that's a big no. You should be able to. The only thing that I would now say is, how do you stop Instagram vendors? Like, you can send in a message and say, please, I would like to stop receiving. It's within your right to do so, right? You send in a
Mm-hmm.
message and say, please, I would like to stop receiving these messages. But if they don't comply with that, that is where, it gets a little bit techy.
It does. I think so. In this scenario, I think this is one of those ones where, I mean, the conversation really. I mean, the easy thing to do would be maybe block them. That's the one thing you can do. But I
Fastest
think
way.
in this particular scenario, let's look at talking about like the vendors themselves. I'm a vendor. What and what shouldn't I be doing with the customer's information? Like you've mentioned one rightly by saying
Hmm.
that purpose limitation. If you collected their number to make sure that they receive their delivery, best be just that to make sure that they receive their delivery, not to give them ads for other things, not to give them ads for other things, not to send them broadcast messages about your church program or your or whatever event that it is that you want them to attend, not to yeah, things like that, right? But I think so. What other things
Mm-hmm.
can a vendor supposed to be aware of, like in terms of using their customers' information?
So once you collect the data and you've done whatever it is you need to do to provide that service to that particular customer, the easiest thing is to just erase that information. It should no longer be with you, unless in the case of returning customers where you just want to make the whole process easier for them and so on. But then another thing is also
Mm,
data minimization as well. So you should try and minimize the amount of the kind
mm,
of data you're even collecting in the first place, right? So that data minimization is also another
yeah.
principle of the NDPR and the GDPR. You should minimize the amount of the kind of data you're collecting. So if you're a business that you're selling just bags and shoes, what would you need? You would not need somebody's health data or even their bank information or anything. The only thing you would need would literally be an address. So as a vendor yourself, to protect your own brand and the name of your company, just avoid taking
Hmm.
information that you don't really need from people, and then also avoid using their
Exactly.
data in ways that it's not supposed to be used, in the first place. And yeah, so that's what I think
Hmm.
I would suggest. Don't do
I
it.
think one that really freaks me out with vendors as well is like when you send them your address, like they always have your address. So if someone hacks their WhatsApp or hacks their social
That's about
media
it.
or hacks, that person has access to loads of addresses. So it's actually,
Yeah,
and they could, if they start a robbing spree, they could think that the vendor actually gave that information if they notice there's a consistent pattern with
pattern.
the houses that are being
100%.
robbed or whatnot. So
Yeah,
this is
and
something that
mhm.
actually, when you think about it, it's advantageous to the
It's
vendors to
actually, if you
be
think
cautious and
about it
reduce
in a
the amount
deeper
of data
sense,
they have.
yeah. Yeah, yeah,
Mm.
because
And I
now
mean,
that
there's
I'm
also
even
the option of
thinking,
actually
now that you
asking
said it,
people.
I was just going to say that now that you've even said that, I'm just thinking about like the Instagram vendors I regularly patronize, and how they just sort of know, like immediately I send the money for whatever good I'm buying, they just immediately, I like, sometimes I get a delivery call, just be like, oh, my madam sent me from this, I'm bringing this, and I'm like, oh, okay, wow. And for me, I never complain because it's so effective. I'm just like, oh, okay, cool. Like, but now that I'm thinking about it, so that just means that some person somewhere just has access to where I live and, can do whatever they want with that information. And it's quite scary because
They
she
want,
obviously didn't delete
exactly.
it. Yeah, she obviously didn't delete it because she knows I'll come back, and it just makes it easier. Unless I request for it to be
Mm,
deleted and I'm saying I'm no longer going to be your customer. So yeah.
mm. But then I feel like there should also be the opportunity to actually say, you've mentioned rightly, like customers should be able to say, please delete this message. I don't, please delete it. Or even you can unsend it on Instagram. I think you can unsend a message, and you
Yeah,
can
you
also
can.
delete
Yeah, you
a
can.
message that you sent
100%.
on WhatsApp as well. So those are options.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
those are things you can do. But I think even for vendors, I
Mm.
think it's only professional and it's only right for your sake that you actually ask people, would you like for me to keep this information, or just for your own peace and ease, just delete it.
Mhm,
Just
mhm.
delete it.
100%.
I
100%,
think
yeah.
I think people don't really think of scenarios where they get hacked as something that is potentially threatening to their business. But you want to save
Mm.
yourself this situation where you have to send everybody messages. Oh, sorry, we've been hacked. If you receive any
Sorry,
message from this
you.
account, don't respond.
Sorry, you. Yeah,
Okay,
100%.
so there's another one. Someone has hacked and
Mhm.
taken control of my social media account. They're asking my contacts for money and demanding a ransom if I want my account back. What's going on here?
You start by praying to God first, but I'm joking. But like, in because that's one of the worst things that can happen to you. Imagine having an account for years, especially if you're like a big social media person, and then someone just comes and hacks the account. Where do you even want to start from? Please, God. And it's so interesting that I received
Exactly.
someone had called me yesterday and was asking about the sort of thing. He had an account for I think 14 years, and it got hacked, and he had
Oh
difficulties
wow.
reaching out to the social media platform. And I felt so bad because I was like, oh, I do, like, how do you go about something like this? um But yeah, so basically hacking, right? What a lot of people don't know, or what people don't really, it's the same way, like the same thing we talked about the banks. You need to be able to make sure that the information, because the way they hack most of the time is that they just impersonate, well, not impersonate, but they just try to act as if they're the, so example, if it's Instagram, they'll just try and send you an email and it will look like it's coming from Instagram, and to have all the details and the little Instagram app
Yeah, to reset your password.
icon and so on.
Mm.
Exactly. And then they'll be like, oh, reset your password, and then that's how they get, or they'll send you for, so I was reading online that apparently even for like content creators, what they do is, so what they usually do is they send an email saying, so wherever for content creators, you have to post original content to protect yourself, and not protect, so that
Mm-hmm.
Instagram, so they will flag down content that is not original content because of copyright laws, right? So
Yeah.
what these
Yeah.
hackers do, they're so smart, and they just send you all these emails and say, oh, we're going to pull down this post because of
Hmm.
copyright violations. So what you need to do is to
Hmm.
bring in this is type in your password, type in this, log into your account, etc., and that's how they receive, they get access to your account and they hack it. So I think it's very important, wherever, even if you're not a content creator and it's just your personal account, just always try and make sure who is sending these emails to you. Even at work, sometimes what happens with me is I receive emails, because I work with a lot of organizations, international organizations. So
Yeah.
I receive a lot of emails that they claim to be from the United Nations, or they claim to be from WHO. And then they send in these emails saying, oh, this is that. But like whenever I read, so I'll speak about a specific instance. And so when I was reading through an email that apparently was supposed to have come from the United Nations, and then there was a spelling error, and I was like, I was like, hi, no way. Why would there be a spelling error in a United Nations email, and in an email from the United Nations? And I immediately just ignored it. I ignored it, and then I sent it. I told our cybersecurity team about it, and just so that they can take a look at it as well, because I'd received a couple of those kind of emails. So it's
Yeah.
always important to just be diligent with the kind of, don't be in a rush. Never ever be in a rush. You can even try and contact
Hmm.
Instagram and see if they had sent an email like that. But if you just take your time to look through the email itself, I'm sure they would have made one or two
They would
mistakes. They can't get
know.
it. It can't be
Yeah.
perfect. Yeah, it can't be perfect. And so
Hmm.
apparently, I was reading that Instagram accounts get hacked like every 10 minutes, which is crazy. So we need
Wow.
to learn how to,
That's a lot
yeah,
of
and also
hacking going on.
activate your, yeah, a lot of hacking. We need to learn to activate our two-factor authentication. Oh, please activate your
Please, Lena, can you
two-factor
explain
authentication.
two-factor authentication to us? Please, can you explain it to us on what it means
Okay,
and
so
why
for
it's what? Yeah.
So usually with two-factor authentication, what people do is that, what organizations usually do is they have, it verifies your identity by basically just using one or two factors. So the first factor could be, okay, they'll ask you to type in your password, which is just the regular way, and then there will be a second factor, to try and see if it's still the same person, and they would add in another. For example, let me use Google. So if you sign into your Google account on another device, what usually happens is you can
Device.
type
Yeah.
in your password. Yeah, you can type in your password and you be signed into the device. But before you can do anything else, they will send another email to the original device that you're used to using, and say, or they'll send in a
Yeah.
code and say, and ask you to type in that code onto the, for example, if you're
Open
using
the
your
app.
laptop,
Yeah.
they would ask you to type in, yeah, so quickly just type in
Hmm.
the password onto your laptop, so that they can make sure that it's the same person. Instagram does the same, WhatsApp as well does the same. You can, sometimes just randomly they ask you to type in a code, like after like a couple of weeks, out of
Yeah.
nowhere, you receive this pop-up where
Yeah.
you have to type in your authentication code. So yeah, very very important, please.
I mean, this is very important stuff, right? So make sure that you have your 2FA settings on. I know it seems arduous sometimes and long that you have to authenticate yourself twice to access your account, but it's actually the best thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think another thing is also password practices. I think that's something that we can also talk a bit about. Um, I
Mm-hmm.
heard. that the best type of passwords to have is a sentence. So don't use
Mm.
anything that obviously identifies you, your name, your phone number, your birthday, your 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 whatever. Don't use anything that is a public information about you as your password. That's the first thing. Number two, don't use um don't use a sentence. A sentence is probably the best way because it's long enough and it could be any sentence. And don't use the same password for multiple platforms. I think those are some of the good password practices that
Mm.
I know. I don't know. Are there any that you wanna? Yeah. Are there any that you wanna tell us or
Um,
know or you wanna
I
share?
mean, you've mentioned you always make sure you change your passwords once, like try and change it. It's difficult to keep up, but if you could change your passwords every
Mhm.
4 or 5 months, that would also be good, and it's a safer way. It's a very safe
Yep.
way for you to keep. And then also, so like at work, when we register our work emails, they make you have you can't so the passwords are usually so confusing, it's so annoying, but at the same time it's like, okay, they're trying to protect their information, the work
Yeah.
information and so on. But sometimes they'll ask you to have like caps lock, and then you have numbers, and then you have characters, like they have all these things inside the password so that it's so difficult for whoever's
Yeah.
trying to guess your
To
password to be
guess
able to
it.
access that. Yeah, so it's
Yeah.
important to
Yeah.
have those kind
Definitely
of
things like
passwords,
obviously
and
caps lock. Yeah. Symbols. Mm,
yeah, and then symbols, and then don't use the same password over all your social media. That is one of the dumbest things you could do, to be honest.
of course.
Um, do not use the same
Yeah.
password over
Because if
across
they hack
all
one, they
your
hack
social
all.
media. Exactly. I mean, you've
Yeah.
made the job so easy for them. Literally, they just have to just, type in that same password, and they have access to your Netflix, your Instagram, your Facebook, your Twitter, everything. And so it's always important to change passwords as much as you can as well. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, something I wanted to mention earlier, especially with two-factor authentication. Yes, you can set a long password, a complicated password, but I think in the whole thing about brute force attacks, so where they have like programs or softwares that basically run different combinations of words, letters, numbers until they actually arrive at something that could be your password, right? So that's why it's important that
Mm.
you basically they try different combination of dictionary words. That's why people encourage you to use this sentence. It's also the reason why we encourage you having two-factor authentication, because after the password entering phase, even if they get through the password, they wouldn't be able to get through to your account because you have another system of check of authentication that maybe has to do with your phone number, you opening the app yourself and things like that. Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's why these companies
Mhm.
always send you, those emails that you get, someone has signed on to your account from this location, verify that it was you or not. Google does that. So
Mhm.
just being very cautious about, like, making sure that it's not just having a good password, or making sure that when they ask you to do a password on a website and they're like, so they don't accept the password because it doesn't have the capital letter or
Yes.
things like that. It's for your
Yeah.
safety. There's
So
a real
just the
reason why
strong
those things
password.
are. Yes. So
Mhm.
so exactly, make sure that you have a strong password. I think a tip that I would probably suggest as well, maybe something that Lena could also shed some light on, is using a password manager.
Mm.
So
Mhm.
password
Mhm.
managers apparently are a good way to sort of, because you're having different, we've said don't use the same password
Keep track.
across different platforms, to keep track exactly. And
Mm.
yeah, so basically just having a
But
password manager
but the
basically.
only thing
Yeah.
Yeah, but the only thing about password manager, and I think about this all the time, is that how about if somebody hacks into your password manager, and then they have access to all your passwords? Although with password managers, what usually happens is that they ask you to type in a code to be able to see that password. So it's not like once you open up your password manager, like the list of passwords, you can just they're still they still use some form of pseudonymization, I guess I would call it. So you still have all the x x x x x x, and then you have to type in your password to be able to see that. So there's still some security, there's still some protection around it. But I don't know, it's just a personal thought. I always think about, if somebody hacks into your password manager, you have finished.
So the thing is, so with password managers, you also have to be cautious because you have to be careful of the ones you choose. So what they do is that with password managers, they try to make them unlikely to hack. And when I say password managers, I don't mean Apple Save Your Password or you know, like the normal ones that come with your
Google Save Your
devices.
Password.
They're actually specific, exactly. Google Save Your Password. They're actually specific, dedicated platforms that offer these. I mean, we'll try to link some into the description for this episode, um, so that people can actually try and maybe go and get themselves a password manager if you feel like that would be something that would help you. It's better than writing your passwords down
100%.
in a book or something. So yeah, that's one way to go about
That's
it.
a
Okay,
horrible
next
idea.
scenario.
Don't do it.
Oh, we're coming.
Mhm.
Don't write your password down in a book. Every time I go on a website, I see the option for cookies and always consent to all cookies because I'm worried if I do not, I will not be able to use the website. Is it okay? Is it okay to always consent to cookies? And what happens if I do not? I think we've sort of touched on this. So this is like a rapid, quick answer.
We've already said cookies. There are different kinds of cookies. You mentioned that there are functional, and then there are the necessary cookies. But you know, when you get on websites, a lot of the time they give you there's like a toggle button that allows you to choose which cookies you want to which cookies, and these are usually for EU based websites. I don't see this with websites in like the US and so on, but most EU based websites, they give you that option, and there are usually toggle buttons, so you can pick the kind of cookies you want to allow. And then, but usually for necessary cookies, they keep that. You can't necessarily choose whether, you don't have that choice to choose whether you want to or not. It's usually there, but then there are also a ton of other cookies. So I think be mindful of what, first of all, Google what cookies are. A lot of people don't know what cookies are. That's the first step I think I would say to the general public. Google what cookies are first, and then try
It's
and
not the cookie that
identify
you
which.
eat.
Exactly. That's such a dad joke. But yeah, so Google what they are, and then sort of check into the kind of cookies that you should be allowing and the ones that you shouldn't, and then move on from there.
Yeah, I think just to sort of help you understand. So when you're Googling, you know what kind of cookies you're looking for. Cookies are tracking technology, so they basically track you across multiple platforms. So you're not looking for Maryland cookies or some other type of American cookies or whatever.
Yeah,
Just joking.
I just realized that once you
Okay,
type cookies,
so
obviously the first. Sorry, I just said that. I just realized that once you type in cookies, the first thing you're going to see are actual like edible cookies. Please, no, it's not the edible ones. Just
edible
try and
cookies,
add.
yeah.
Add cookie. Even if you say cookies and you add the word privacy, something will come up. Google is very easy. It makes life so much easier. So like it will take you to the kind of cookies you're looking for.
Okay. Okay, so I feel like my Instagram can hear me on the phone, can even hear my thoughts. I keep getting advertisements for things I tell my friends I'm interested in. I find this creepy. Is there anything I can do about it?
This is funny because I just remembered that like a couple of days ago, someone at my office was looking for a dress for a particular event, and she picked up her phone and she kept shouting to her phone, dinner dress, gown, dinner gown, and then she kept saying Lagos, Abuja, dinner gown, and I was like, are you okay? Like, why are you screaming dinner gown into your phone? And she was like, wait and see, I'll start getting advertisements of all kinds of
Oh my
dinner dresses
goodness.
and gowns. And I was like, this is not a good thing. You're not supposed to, you're not supposed to be picking using this for things like this. But yeah, sorry, that was just something I remembered. And it does happen, and it's really, really creepy, isn't it? It's so creepy when that happens.
Yeah.
When you have apps, when you have Google and Instagram and etc., just listening in to all your conversations, and you get adverts. Oh, the scenario even says, I find this creepy. It is, but micro targeting.
It's
What
creepy, yeah.
do you think can be done about it? How do you avoid situations like this? Because most people do not even sign into, most people don't even agree to it. It's just something that's just ignored, and it's really scary that they're able to tailor advertisements and political. The one that scares me the most is political messages as well. And so maybe from listening in your conversations, they know that, for example, you're supporting this party, and the fact that they can influence your thoughts and your opinions for you to now end up picking a particular. It's just I mean, and this is something that has happened with the Cambridge Analytica scandal. I'm sure we've heard of that.
Okay, so I think with this issue, I think so sometimes some of it has to do with the way your social media settings are. One of the things that we are also looking forward to putting out this privacy week, hopefully, is a sort of manual on how to sort of adjust your settings, set your social media settings to reduce targeted advertising, so micro targeting. To be fair, let me first say that I don't think the listening. Okay, maybe Siri is listening to you, and because Siri then Googles. No, like so if you activate Siri or any voice any voice they called voice search services, anyone, those ones, Siri, I don't remember what the Android one is called, but if you activate those, if you actually click on the button, and they come up and you ask them a question, you're going to get ads about it. But to say they're listening to your phone calls, no, they're not. I think it's just AI that has basically gotten to the point where they have enough data about you, they can almost figure out
What it
almost
is you
precisely what your
want and
interests
what
are,
you're looking for and
and
so on.
they serve you advertisement based on that. Exactly. So it's not nobody's. It's creepy, yes, but this is why you should manage your information online and how much information about yourself you're putting out there and who you're giving that information to. One of the reasons why we
Yeah.
recommended backlights actually is because of that. So you know who
Mm,
you're giving your information to. Now, I
yeah.
think one of the so adjust your settings. So hopefully when we put out that manual, you'll be able to see how to adjust settings across different social media platforms to basically reduce. It wouldn't reduce your the fact that you would not get advertisements. It just would not be what you're thinking. It just may not
All
be
the
what you
time.
have said or what you're thinking, because it's basically it wouldn't be. It could be generic so for example, I don't remember which one of my social media platforms. I don't have advertisement that's based targeted to my demographic. I just have general advertisement, like, so I'd get all
Yeah.
sorts of random ads that have no business to do with me, but I'm perfectly happy with that. I don't feel the need to see ads based on things that people in my demographic or people in my profile are looking at. So yeah, that's probably the way that I think you can maybe sort that out. But really just being
So
careful
yeah.
about what information about yourself you put outside. I always say
Mm, mm,
I rather keep to myself things like my religious affiliation, my political opinion. I don't feel the need to share that. If they guess and they guess correctly, good on them. But things like even you like liking things that are, so for example, your church has an Instagram page and then you like their post, or your political party has an Instagram page, you share, or like they have so whatever social media platform you repost, you share. So those are literally little things that are giving the system or the engine the data about you because you've liked or whatever that. Um, yeah. Okay. Last one.
100%.
Last one. I keep getting messages from a particular payday loan company about different people who have defaulted on their loans. Often these people are people whose contacts I do not even have. What's going on here?
These loan sharks, horrible, horrible people, horrible guys, I can't overemphasize on the word horrible. But the thing is, what they're doing now is just so ridiculous because, and funny enough, this whole loan shark thing came from countries in Asia. So like this wasn't even like the loan sharks are operating now in Nigeria are mostly not even being run by like the directors of the company. Once you investigate, you find out that they're not even being run by Nigerians. These are people from countries in Asia that are coming into Nigeria because it's such a big market. Nigeria is always a big market when it comes to things like this, and so they've started to push these things in Africa, right? Unfortunately, the victims and then also the companies themselves. So in terms looking at it from the perspective of the people taking out the loans, sometimes they're actually the ones at fault, because what happens is, so I've received calls where the person will be like, oh, I took a loan from 6 different companies, and then I did not pay back because God has not provided me with the funds to pay back yet. But I had the intention of paying back. It's just that the money didn't come through. And so then they've started to push my messages. I know that, things are hard in the country and everything, and people have financial issues, but you need to also be responsible for the kind of decisions you're making. And taking loans from 6, 7, 8 different loan companies and not paying back any of those loans, you are also going to be seen as someone that is at fault. So from our perspective, even in the bureau, is we're looking more at the people that were sent these messages without their consent. So you're just sitting down minding your business, and you start receiving, they start bombarding you with messages saying, oh, this person is a rapist, this person is a serial chronic debtor, this person, this person has taken so amount of money. You don't care, like, you're just sitting down, you never consented to that sort of thing. So the question is now whether loan sharks are even allowed to put that as a because what they'll tell you is that if you look at our terms and conditions, we told them that this is what was going to happen, or they've given us consent. But in the first place, are you even exactly but in the first place, are you even allowed to put in, because their contacts, the list of contacts within that person's phone, the person that's taken the loan's phone, is not specifying anything about, they never agreed to keep on receiving constant messages, so you have to look at it from that perspective, and you have to look at it from the perspective of whether you're even allowed to put in those kind of stipulations within your terms and conditions, and or your privacy policy, and what kind of privacy policy are you supposed to have in the first place? Like, what is the quality of the privacy policy? What kinds of terms can you put into that, and so on? And so yeah, I definitely think that there's a lot of I think there are very, very, very few loan shark companies that are actually doing the right thing in trying to retrieve their money back from their customers. Most of them, the mechanisms they're using now is just extremely dangerous. It's putting a lot of people's lives at risk as well. People are losing their jobs. I've received a call where someone called and was just crying and crying, and was just saying that, like, my boss is about to fire me because of this loan that I took. And it's really sad. This is personal information that shouldn't, it shouldn't be out there in the public. Nobody needs to know that you took a loan. Nobody needs to be called a criminal or a rapist, or just simply from taking a loan. And the sad part is they then also put pictures, with the horrible messaging and everything. And so yeah, it's definitely something we're working on. We're working in collaboration with FCCPC on this particular matter, but it's just such a big thing. The thing spread like wildfire. Like, the whole thing just spread in last 2-3 years. Like, it just went crazy, and so we're just trying to see how to control that from a regulatory standpoint.
This issue of payday loan company. So now, from the perspective of me as somebody who has received a message from a payday loan company, what I hear you say is like, okay, so for now we're working on finding a solution as a bureau to these problems, but for now, what can I do? I guess the only thing you can do is block them.
So, okay, so for you, just receiving the messages from someone else that has from the company that's the loan. So basically, that the same thing has happened to me several times. It's very difficult to because you never consented to. You don't even know who this company is. You don't know why they're messaging you. So how it's difficult to. So what we do is we try to contact the companies and say, this person brought in a complaint. They have no business with you, and they're receiving messages from you, and that shouldn't be allowed, right? And you're not allowed to do that. It's not within. Even if it's within your terms and conditions, you're wrong. And we're trying to get like the police investigation team to also investigate the companies and their practices, and see whether they're even running a legitimate a loan company as well.
Mm.
But in terms of, there's really not a lot you can do, because you had no you know, you can ask them to try
Pass
to
in the
stop receiving
transaction.
messages, but I
Yeah.
would tell you out of experience, yeah, they might not listen to you. And so the best thing would be to try and send in a complaint to the bureau, and then we will take it up from there and try and
Yeah.
investigate and see what can be done.
Leena, thank you so much for being on this episode. I feel like there has been a lot, especially the insights into not only things that you can do personally, but also stuff about like what the bureau is doing to sort of get ahead of some
Mhm.
of these issues and sort of find help the
Mhm.
consumers find solutions. And the fact that you've also, I think this is the first time that I've really felt like, okay, you're really sending an email and complain, and they are looking at the emails.
Mhm. Mhm.
Because you can complain, everybody says you can complain, just like companies say you can send us an email and complain to us, but nobody does anything about it. But to sort of
Mhm.
hear and
Mhm.
see from your perspective that we actually take these things seriously, we're investigating it, we can even help you at this rate, because what you said basically about the loan companies is you send the bureau an email, the bureau reaches out to the company on your behalf. That's almost like an indirect way of helping us as data subjects sort of enforce our
Mhm.
data subject rights in a world, especially in a
Mhm.
society in Nigeria where a lot of companies
Mhm.
can't do without offering the basic enforcement for our rights that we need, right?
Mhm.
Thank you so much for being on the
Mhm.
episode. Like, it's been a blast, absolutely. I have been looking forward to this episode, and it did not fall short of my expectations. It was amazing. Thank you so much, Leena.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Yetunde, for having me. I've said this to you before, I've always wanted to be on a podcast, and I'm happy that my first podcast is on privacy, bar, and bans. So excited about that. Thank you so much for having me. I had a good
Yay!
time as well. It was great being on your podcast.
Until next time.
Yeah, it remains our lovely DPO and I, Itunde. This episode was sponsored by Ikigai Innovation Initiative and was brought to you by Tech Hive Advisory.
And a big shout out to our executive producer, Ridwan Oluyede, associate producers, Dolakwan Yetunde.
This podcast was edited by Ayonfe Aino, shout out to her, and our podcast associate Victoria Adaramola, and graphics by Okwe Abujade.